Okay. Hello, Halima.
Hello, ma'am.
How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hello, Nimra.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम मैम।
वालेकुम सलाम, क्या हाल है? Hello, Elia.
मैं ठीक हूँ मैम।
Okay. Elia, are you there?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, ma'am. Ma'am, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hello, Aruba.
Hello मैम।
Walaikum salam. Okay. So 1 more minute and then we start, okay? Okay, I'm going to take the attendance. So Ahmed Hassan, Fahad bin Ahmed, Hafiza Aisha, Ali Musa, Mahnoor, Nimra,
प्रेजेंट मैम।
Sayyid Azad Asad, Farooq Ahmed, Awais Khabar Gill, Laiba, Sahib Khan,
Present, ma'am.
good, Elia, Amna, Nashra, Aruba,
Present, ma'am.
okay,
Present, ma'am.
Halima, Nawab Siddiq,
Present, ma'am.
okay, Sumawi and Saul Rafaqat. Okay, so what were we studying last time? Let's do a recap. Yes, who would like to say something?
Maybe we were studying stars, their distance, their heat and luminosity.
Can you see the board? No. Okay, I'm going to share the board. Okay, yes. So you were talking about stars, heat, luminosity. Yes, anything else?
Their distance from us
Okay, distance,
and their size.
size. Yes. Would yes. Good. Anyone else? So yes, we are talking about stars, which are very interesting and fascinating. And we have, no matter whether you're a physicist or not, I think everyone has an interest in this. We studied about the properties of stars that are related to its heat, which is again related to temperature, which is again related to color. So also, this is mentioned in your book, as well as we shared a video as well where this is explained. And this is an interesting phenomena. It's also explained with the help of the HR diagram, right? And luminosity, again, is also related to intensity. We talked about this. There was a small equation about it. And in the HR diagram, also, you have a plot of luminosity of a star and how these are. We also talked about classification of stars, right? Why there are different stars classified with different names or groups, like the main sequence, for example. And this classification we discussed last time was on the basis of temperature and color. A scale was shown and explained how we can relate temperature and color and then classify stars according to that. And you saw terms like the main sequence stars, it's a group of stars, and then also which color corresponds to a hotter star and which color corresponds to lesser temperature, and so on. We talked about Kelvin was the unit that we were using. Distance of a star is measured in what units? Distance of a star is measured in? Yes. Distance of a star. Okay, what are the units of the distance of a star? Okay. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see the board? No.
No, ma'am.
I'll share again. So we were talking about stars. We were talking about the different characteristics, properties, classifications, and terminology and concepts related to stars. So we were talking about distance of a star. What are the units of a distance of a star? This was a question. This was something we talked about in the beginning of the chapter. In what units will you measure the distance of a star? What units will you measure the mass of a star? So that I'll leave that question with you. And now today we will start with stellar evolution. Okay. So today we are going to talk about stellar evolution. So what is stellar evolution? What do you understand by the word stellar evolution?
Ma'am, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I was saying that we are talking about stellar evolution. Okay. What do you mean by stellar? stellar, anything related to the star, we can use the word stellar for that, right? What is evolution? Evolution, we are referring to the life cycle of a star. Okay, so how a star begins, and then what are the various stages of the star, and then eventually the death of a star, and then how new stars are formed. So this is the process of evolution. So here I've written an explanation for this. You can see stellar evolution is the process by which a star changes over the course of time. When we're talking of time in the cosmos, we're not talking about times in terms of minutes or hours or days. No, this is a long period of time, right? So depending on the mass of the star, again, I talked about just now when we were talking about the units for the distance of a star, the unit for the mass of the star. We cannot use the normal SI units for this, right? We have to use bigger units. And like in the beginning of the chapter, we have discussed these units, right? For example, distance in this case is measured in light years, or it is measured in parsecs, for example. The definitions are given in the beginning of the chapter. So again, the mass of the star is kg is a very small unit for the mass of a star. So we usually measure this in terms of solar masses, again, relating it to the mass of the sun, right? So its lifetime can range from a few million years. Just as I said, the lifetime of a star, the time in this case is of the order of millions of years. And for the most massive, to trillions of years for the least massive. So last time we discussed the classification of stars based on their temperature, right? And color. So we correlated temperature, color to the star. Now, today we are going to correlate the mass of the star and then its life. The mass of the star, again, we will see how this can relate to the various stages of development of the star. And the table, of course, shows the lifetimes of stars as a function of their masses. Okay, you don't have to go into that detail. I can erase this. Wait. And wait. And so all stars are formed from collapsing clouds of gas and dust, and these are called nebulae or molecular clouds. So over the course of millions of years, these protostars settle down into a state of equilibrium, becoming what is known as a main sequence star. So these are some interesting terms that we come across, and we've also talked about this from time to time, and you must have heard about this even before the course, right? So again, we are talking about temperatures, luminosities, and their correlations. This was discussed in the previous classes. Again, we talked about main sequence. This was discussed in the classification of stars, right? This is the size of the star. The size of the star is given in the range of where our sun is the radius of the sun. It's measured in terms of, in this case. And stars in the youngest open clusters are found to lie along the main sequence. So main sequence is the main group of stars. Stars in the oldest clusters deviate from the main sequence, and these are mainly the red giants, for example. Okay. So these are some interesting terms that we explained in the previous classes. We also talked about the HR diagram, which relates the temperature, the luminosity of the stars. And we are also talking about the evolutionary model of stars, the life and death and the life cycle of a star. The basic idea of how a star is born, how it evolves, and then what are the physics concepts involved in this. The concepts and the reasons for this are the gravitational pressure, for example, and the thermal pressure. And we know that we also talked about the process of energy generation inside a star, right? So we know that, for example, fusion is a very important process by which energy generation takes place inside a star. And this has a role to play also in the size of the star, the life of a star, and the luminosity of the star, and all of these terms that we are talking about. So the fusion was a topic that came under nuclear reactions. We've talked about different nuclear reactions. We've also solved some problems related to this. For example, we talked about how hydrogen plus hydrogen can generate can be fused together to produce a large amount of energy, which you can calculate using this equation, right? So there's the hydrogen cycle, there is a hydrogen helium cycle, there's a carbon nitrogen oxygen cycle, and these are all given in the book, and we've discussed them several times, right? And so we will continue from here. And here you can see energy sources in the main sequence stars, right? So energy sources, for example, combustion is the process of the burning of coal, but we're not talking about the burning of coal. What's happening in this case is mostly fusion or gravitational collapse. So this is what happens in the sun. The sun is a very important star for us here on the earth. We know that. So here you have nuclear radiation and radioactivity, alpha, beta, gamma rays. We've discussed this before as well. And the properties of these rays. And here you have nuclear fusion that we have discussed in detail. We've solved problems. And today I'm mentioning this again because this is also related to the life of the star. It's also related to the stellar evolution topic, right? So this is the PP cycle. There are various nuclear reactions that can become under the umbrella of nuclear fusion. So PP cycle means proton-proton cycle. A hydrogen nucleus is also known as a proton. So we talked about hydrogen and helium and their abundance in a star, and also their importance in the universe, and how the Big Bang later on led to the to hydrogen, helium, and then later on to heavier nuclei. So this was known as nucleosin synthesis, right? So H1 is hydrogen. Hydrogen is an atom where you have a nucleus and you have one electron around the nucleus, and inside the nucleus you have only one proton. So that's why it's since in nuclear reactions, only the nucleus is taking part, so therefore there's only one proton, and that's why we normally call a hydrogen nucleus as a proton. So that's why it's written a PP cycle, a proton-proton cycle. You can see how two hydrogens combine to produce deuterium. Again, these are isotopes of hydrogen. So H2 is an isotope. So the nucleus is known as deuteron. And then it produces a positron and a neutrino. Neutrino is again a particle. So you have various different reactions that can take place. So you can have a deuteron combining with a proton or a hydrogen to produce helium and gamma rays, for example. And you can have, again, helium, again has isotopes, right? And these can then combine, tritium, for example, they can combine to produce He4, which is helium nuclei are also known as alpha particles, right? So these are different reactions, and you can see there's a large amount of energy that is generated. We calculated these in the problems that we solved and practiced, right? And you can see this is a large amount of energy. Mega means 10⁶ electron volts, right? So it's a huge amount of energy that's produced. And we're trying to do this on Earth. It's under the research stage. It has not yet reached a stage where we can actually use it and commercialize it. But this is a very interesting prospect. And if it works, we will have a huge source of energy, more than we even need. Okay, so fusion can take place through the proton-proton cycle. It can also take place through the carbon-nitrogen-oxygen cycle. So like we know that in the beginning stages of the universe, we had hydrogen and helium, and later on during nucleosynthesis, heavier nuclei were produced, and carbon, nitrogen, oxygen were later on produced, and these can also lead to fusion. One of the things about fusion is that you need a very high temperature to achieve fusion. So for example, here you can see it requires a temperature of 10⁸ 10⁸ is a lot. It's about 100 million kelvins. So that's how you can understand how the temperature, and normally stars are at a higher temperature, right? So that's why this is a phenomena that can take place in stars. But then for these nuclei here, again, you need a very high temperature. You can see this over here. And this happens in the cores of hot, massive stars. So both of these processes require temperatures and pressures that are very high, and these are found in the cores of stars. We've not been able to do this yet on the Earth, although it is in the experimental research stage. There are some prototypes that are being built, right? There are some very interesting projects if you're interested. Okay, right. So energy transfer from the core to the surface. Of course, when this energy is produced inside the star, it will be transferred to it. The fusion reaction takes place in the core of the star, and this will then be transferred to the surface of the star. And later on, you can, at a later stage, when we're talking about evolution, gravitational collapse can take place, and this can also release energy, and this will heat the star. So this is very important in the initial stages of stellar evolution. And nuclear fusion, the fuel for fusion is hydrogen, helium, or maybe some other nuclei, as we've just discussed. Okay, so there is a balance between the gravitational forces pulling the layers of the star's atmosphere inwards and thermal pressure forces supporting. Okay, right. Share screen and share. So we were talking about gravitational collapse and how this is related to the energy produced in the star, the nuclear fuel in the star. It's related to gravitational forces, the thermal pressure, which again depends on the temperature of the gas in a star. Okay. So here you can see the relationship between, this is the main sequence, the group of stars we talked about in the last classes. And this is related to temperature and luminosity. And here you can see how at higher temperature, the luminosity increases. And this is the HR diagram, okay? And we're talking about the evolution of a star. We can understand this in terms of the concepts that we have studied, and the HR diagram also is helpful in understanding this, right? And here we are talking about the collapsing of the cloud or the molecular cloud or the nebula that we're talking about, and how this happens. And this is how heat is produced, and then gravitational potential energy is converted into heat, and angular momentum is conserved. You can see this here. Gravity versus thermal pressure. Again, as I said, that the thermal pressure also determines the size of the star, and the pressure in turn also depends on the temperature of the star, which depends on the nuclear reactions that are taking place in the star. So these are the main sequence stars. Okay, so I would now like to show you a diagram about this, right? So let's see. So you can see this diagram, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you can see the various stages of a star, okay, in this diagram. You can see that, wait a minute, okay, no. Wait, so you can see it's starting from the nebula here. So this is the nebula, and this is, this will then develop into the protostar, and you have an explanation here of the distances. For example, you have a small explanation of what this means. So a protostar is a dense when a dense region shrinks, it forms a protostar, and the temperature in this case is about 27 million Fahrenheit. We are not using Fahrenheit. We prefer Kelvins. In this case, it's written is in centigrade, so that you have an idea of the temperature. So it's millions of degrees. This later on evolves into a main sequence star. So in this case, the star gives off light and heat produced by nuclear fusion in its core. So you can see this diagram, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, now you can see it better, okay? So in this case, you also have the distances mentioned, you have the temperature, you have a small explanation in this case. Now the main sequence star has, there can be two things that can happen. Either it will evolve into a red supergiant or it will evolve into a red giant. Now this is the red supergiant. In this case, the star greatly expands and gets redder as it cools. You saw the last video where we related color to temperature, right? And again, there are the distances mentioned over here. Here it's mentioned in kilometers. This is just for you again to have an idea, but the proper unit that you will see in most books or sources would be light years or even parsecs, okay? So in this case, this is the red giant, the star expands and cools and reddens, okay? So you are saying that in the different stages of the evolution of the star, the color of the star is changing, the size of the star is changing, the distance is also changing. And then if we follow this path, the red supergiant will evolve into the supernova, okay? The outer layers of the star are blown away in explosion, okay? And the supernova later on can become a neutron star or a black hole. So in this case, the core shrinks and becomes incredibly dense before disappearing. And in the case of black hole, you know, this is again a very fascinating concept. And again, I have uploaded a video where you can see some explanation for this. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Right. Okay, so the second path that we talked about from the main sequence star, it can become a red giant, then it can become a planetary nebula. And in this case, you can again see that the temperature, the size, and the distance changes. This can then develop into a white dwarf, and it can later on become a black dwarf. So this is an interesting sequence that you can see in the form of a diagram. Again, I have also uploaded the link to a video where you can actually see an explanation as well as the figures for each of these steps, and also some explanation of the physics concepts of what's happening that we just saw in the book, the forces of gravity, the temperature, the pressure, the fusion that's taking place, and how these stages of the stars are happening. Okay, so one important thing I would like to share with you now is your assessment, as we have been discussing this from the beginning of the course. So I'm going to share this again. It's also uploaded in your Moodle accounts, right? So let's just look at it once again so that you can plan and prepare properly. So where is this? Let me see. This. Cancel. So can you see this? What can you see right now? Yes?
Nothing, ma'am.
Nothing? Okay, I'll share again. No. Okay. This one. Okay. Okay, so I am sharing again. What can you see now?
Assessment plan.
Assessment plan. And what's written on the plan? Which one can you see? You can see the one in which I've written in red color, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Lab exam.
So I have explained to you a long time ago about the lab exam and the format of the lab exam. And I have been uploading the material and you've been practicing it as a homework, right? So practice that material, and based on that material, I will assign one experiment to each of you, okay? And you will then prepare a small report about that experiment and answer whatever question is related to that. So in the form of a Word document, you will prepare a Word document, and you will prepare a small video, just like the ones that I've been uploading, as a demonstration of how that experiment will be performed. You will use one of the virtual links that we have been using, right, to perform the experiment. And you will also narrate what you're doing, which means you will explain with audio, with your voice in that video what you're doing. And then you will compress this video, so that's why I said that get familiar with whatever app you're going to use for the video recording and also for the compression. After compressing, you can upload it to Moodle. So there are two things you're going to upload to Moodle. One will be the Word document. The other will be the video with the narration, which is compressed. Remember to compress it, otherwise it will be bigger in size and it will be difficult to upload. When you compress it, then it will be easier to upload it to Moodle, okay? So practice doing this with any of the experiments that you have prepared so far. And the date for this lab exam, as you can see, is the 17th of June, 2021. But of course, you should be ready for this before this deadline. This is the final deadline, right? You can also...
Ma'am, are we supposed to
मैम
choose our own videos?
बेटा बारी बारी बोलो, एक बच्चा बोले.
Are we supposed to choose our own videos, our own topic for lab exam?
No, I told you I will assign an experiment to you. Okay?
मैम वो उन्हीं टॉपिक्स में से होगा जो हमने पढ़े हुए हैं.
बिल्कुल उसी से मिलता जुलता होगा, ठीक है?
मिलता जुलता या वही होगा?
ये कौन बोल रहा है? साउल रफाकत. मतलब जाहिर है जो हमने पढ़ा है उसी वही आपका सिलेबस है, ठीक है? इज दैट क्लियर? लेकिन कोई भी प्रॉब्लम या कोई भी एग्जाम जो होता है वो आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि एग्जैक्टली जो मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है वही एग्जैक्टली मैंने रिप्रोड्यूस करना है. वो तो फिर मेमोराइजेशन बेस्ड एग्जाम बन जाता है ना. समझ आ गई ना आपको? ओके
मैम.
ठीक है.
मैम इसकी टाइमिंग क्या होगी?
बेटा टाइमिंग मैं फाइनल आपको ईमेल करूंगी जब मैं इसको लिंक इसका ओपन करूंगी, ठीक है? बट आप ये एक्सपेक्ट करें कि 17 जून से पहले आपको रेडी होना है विद एवरीथिंग. एंड देन 17 जून तो लास्ट डेट होती है ना, उससे पहले मैं लिंक ओपन कर दूंगी ताकि आप इस पे काम शुरू कर सकें. समझ आ गई है?
यस मैम.
तैयारी एक दिन में नहीं होती, 2 दिन में भी नहीं होती, एक रात में भी नहीं होती. Learning is a sequential process. It's a step by step process. तो आप हर रोज 1 घंटा 2 घंटा स्पेंड किया करें, ठीक है? आप एक अपने साथ एक एग्जाम करके देखें ना, एक एक्सपेरिमेंट लें, उसको आप बनाएं रिपोर्ट, उसके रिलेटेड वीडियो बनाएं, उसको कंप्रेस करके देखें, उसको चेक करें उसको किस तरह से कोई उसमें प्रॉब्लम आएगा, फिर उसको ठीक करके देखें. सो प्ले विद इट, ठीक है? आपके पास बहुत मतलब शुरू से एवरी वीक आई एम अपलोडिंग the explanations, the videos and the material related. And आपको प्रैक्टिस करने के लिए होमवर्क के तौर पे भी बताया, every week at least 2 hours आपने स्पेंड करने थे throughout the semester. और अब क्योंकि ये असेसमेंट करीब आ गई तो अब आप एवरी वीक के बजाय आप डेली काम करना शुरू करें, ठीक है? अच्छा, क्विज 2 हमारी कंप्लीट हो चुकी है. सो ये दिस इज डन. अब फाइनल एग्जाम हमारा रह गया. फाइनल एग्जाम द सिलेबस इज चैप्टर 3, 4 and 5. दिस विल बी एन एग्जाम. द फॉर्मेट ऑफ द एग्जाम विल बी सिमिलर टू व्हाट यू डिड इन द मिड टर्म एग्जाम, ठीक है ना? उसी तरह से आपने मूडल पे एग्जाम करना है, साथ एक ब्लैंक पेजेस पे उसकी वर्किंग करके उसको स्कैन करके अपलोड करना है, प्लस आपने जूम एक मीटिंग ज्वाइन करनी है, ठीक है? And 2 घंटे का ये एग्जाम होगा. And here you have the deadlines. Is that clear?
Yes ma'am.
Good. So again like I said, अगर आप हर रोज 1 घंटा पढ़ते हैं ये और इसकी तैयारी करते हैं तो it will not be stressful, it will not be difficult. लेकिन अगर आप एक रात में करने की कोशिश करते हैं तो सब कुछ आपको पता कंफ्यूज हो जाता है. You cannot cram it because this is based on understanding, ठीक है ना? It's not based on memorization. Is that clear?
Yes ma'am.
Yes ma'am.
Ma'am.
Yes.
मैम मेरा इंटरनेट का थोड़ा सा इशू था तो काइंडली आप मेरी अटेंडेंस मार्क कर दीजिए.
ठीक है. सो किस किसने लेट ज्वाइन किया है? आमना माहम ने लेट ज्वाइन किया है, राइट? और किसने लेट ज्वाइन किया? साउल रफाकत ने लेट ज्वाइन किया है। एनीवन एल्स? नवाब सदीक ने भी मेरे ख्याल लेट ज्वाइन किया है। ठीक है, कोई रह तो नहीं गया? लेट्स सी। ओके, राइट, सो वी कंटिन्यू। आपकी मीटिंग अब एंड होने लगी है, ठीक है? सो इसलिए माय एडवाइस टू यू इज कि डेली आप घंटा या 2 घंटे जरूर इस पे स्पेंड करें, प्रिपेयर फॉर योर फाइनल एग्जाम एंड फॉर योर लैब एग्जाम। ठीक है, प्रैक्टिस करें और उसको अकॉर्डिंगली आप स्टडी भी करें। एंड इट्स वेरी सिंपल एंड वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग इन फैक्ट, ठीक है? लेकिन अगेन इफ यू ट्राई टू डू इट एट द लास्ट मोमेंट यू विल गेट कंफ्यूज्ड एंड इट विल बिकम वेरी डिफिकल्ट, ठीक है?
Yes, ma'am.
So I have already given you a link for the life and death of a star. So आज के काम से related you can watch that video as well. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Okay, ma'am.
Khuda Hafiz.
God bless you, ma'am.
Thank you. Same to you.